beyond consciousness. We should establish our practice where there is no practice or enlightenment. As long as we practice Zazen in the area where there is practice and enlightenment, there is no chance to make perfect peace for ourselves. In other words, we firmly believe in our true nature. Our true nature is beyond our conscious experience. It is only in our conscious experience that we will find practice and enlightenment or good and bad. But whether or not we have experience of our true nature, what exists there beyond consciousness actually exists, and it is there that we have to establish the foundation of our practice. Welcome back, everyone. We're on page 127 of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, Beyond Consciousness. So, as long as we have these ideas of enlightenment and practice, then we are caught up in the conceptual world, is what Suzuki is saying. We're caught up in a conscious distance from reality rather than being in the midst of reality. So our very enlightenment is not a conscious awareness. It's not something we hold in our consciousness. It is beyond that. We should establish our practice where there is no practice or enlightenment, where we're beyond conceptions of practice and enlightenment, beyond seeking practice and enlightenment. As long as we practice Zazen in the area where there's practice and enlightenment, there's no chance to make perfect peace for ourselves. So as long as we're holding on to something in our Zen, be that even enlightenment itself, this is a blockage to perfect peace and calmness throughout Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. Suzuki Roshi is bringing us back to the essential experience of Zazen. The essential experience of Zazen is total composure, total calmness. Just sit, not even trying to achieve total composure and calmness, but just sit and allow that to manifest. And this is practicing Zazen. And when it doesn't manifest, that's also practicing Zazen. But hanging on to, trying to achieve a state of perfect calmness and peace in our Zazen will just bring us in the wrong direction. Even to have a good thing in your mind is not so good. Buddha sometimes said you should do this or you should be like that. But to have what he says in your mind is not so good. It is a kind of burden for you. And you may not actually feel so good. So it's a kind of a burden to have these idealistic notions, these ideal notions of what Buddhism is, of what Zen is, of what enlightenment is, of the kind of great perfect being that you want to become through Zen practice. This is a burden that must be cast aside and left aside in order for you to truly practice. I mean, so many times Zen students say, oh, I'm trying very hard to do this. I'm trying very hard to be, I'm so short-tempered. I'm trying very hard to be patient. And I'm trying to be much better with my partner and children. And I'm trying to be a much better person at work where I'm very difficult to work with. That's fine. But the trying can become a burden. Returning to calmness and composure allows all these things to flow from that state. To struggle to be this great person, to hold up this big ideal of practice or the self is a huge burden which will exhaust you and won't work to begin with. He says, in fact, to harbour some ill will may even be better than to have some idea in your mind of what is good or what you ought to do. To have some mischievous idea in your mind is sometimes very agreeable, that is true. Actually, good and bad is not the point. Whether or not you make yourself peaceful is the point, and whether or not you stick to it. You see, in the conventional world, in our conventional interactions with other people, of course we have ethical precepts and we have the teachings of the Buddha to help us navigate our life and our ethical choices, etc. But to truly practice is to sit zazen, is to enter the state of perfect composure and calmness where all these things are resolved in any case. And from that natural state, things will begin to emerge and develop and take care of themselves. So, carrying around a great burden of, I must be a good person, kind of self-flagellating yourself, which many of us have learned in our religious traditions, this becomes a blockage to practice. And this prevents true practice. It's kind of an artificial burden, an extra. When you have something in your consciousness, you do not have perfect composure. The best way towards perfect composure is to forget everything. Then your mind is calm and it is wide and clear enough to see and feel things as they are without any effort. So we forget. But Master Dogen talks in the Shobogenzo about forgetting the self, that the dropping off of body and mind. And he also speaks about how an enlightened being isn't necessarily aware of their own enlightenment. It is that natural state. So the best way towards towards perfect composure is to forget everything, even forgetting, even to forget about forgetting. To not make that into something else that you're trying to achieve, as many people are when they sit zazen. They say, "Oh, I had a good zazen. I was, I had no thoughts for a long time. I was beyond consciousness." But zazen, any zazen sitting comes in and out. It lifts, and you have periods of being beyond consciousness in a state of pure composure. You have states where you're agitated, and you have states where you're a little restless. All of this is zazen. The best way to find perfect composure is not to retain any idea of things, whatever they may be, to forget all about them and not to leave any trace or shadow of thinking. But if you try to stop your mind, here this is what Suzuki is saying now, just the point I made a moment ago. If you try to stop your mind or try to go beyond your conscious activity, it will only be another burden for you. I have to stop my mind in my practice, but I cannot. My practice is not so good. This kind of idea is also the wrong way of practice. Do not try to stop your mind, but leave everything as it is. Then things will stay in your mind. Then things will not stay in your mind so long. Things will come as they come and go as they go. Then eventually your clear, empty mind will last, he says, fairly long. So Suzuki Roshi is acknowledging that zazen, has these periods of restlessness and difficulty and caught up with thoughts and delusions and desires, but it also has these periods of perfect composure. Both are zazen. Both are the contents of your zazen. So to have a firm conviction in your original emptiness of your mind is the most important thing in your practice. And he talks a little bit about this was the practice of Buddha and of the sixth patriarch. Actually, emptiness of mind is not even a state of mind, but the original essence of mind, which Buddha and the sixth patriarch experienced. And it's called many names: essence of mind, original face, Buddha nature, emptiness. All of these words mean the absolute calmness of our mind. Very clear statement there from Suzuki Roshi. All of these terms mean the absolute calmness of our mind. This is very helpful for us in our practice. When you sit your zazen, when you sit every day, you just return to that original absolute calmness of your mind. It might only be a glimmer in an individual sit, but there it is. And he says how this is such great rest. You know how to rest physically. You do not know how to rest mentally. Even when you lie in your bed, your mind is still busy. Even when you sleep, your mind is busy dreaming. Your mind is always in intense activity. But in Zazen, we come back to this original total composure of mind. And we truly rest our mind in a way that we don't in any other way. You know, many of us come to practice because we have agitated minds, anxious minds. And, you know, we've tried going on holidays, we've tried going to therapy maybe, and if that's helping, certainly continue. Zazen is not a replacement for that. And then, you know, we try resting, we try throwing ourselves into activities. But we find we don't rest our mind in the really deep and profound sense. And that is possible in this practice, to really rest one's mind. Dogen Zenji said, you should establish your practice in your delusion. Even though you think you are in delusion, your mind, your pure mind is there. So again, you know, we're not trying to achieve an ideal which itself becomes a blockage to achieving that ideal. We establish our practice in our flawed, ordinary human existence. We establish it, as Dogen Zenji says here, in our delusion. Even though you think you are in delusion, your pure mind is still there. To realize pure mind in your delusion is practice. So as you sit Zazen and you have restlessness and anxiety and fantasy and dream and desire, this is still practice. We see this as delusion. We experience it and see it as delusion in our practice as we return to our original composure. If you have pure mind, essential mind in your delusion, the delusion will vanish, yeah. It cannot stay when you say this is delusion. So this is the practice where we're clearing out ourselves, we're cleaning ourselves. So we see our delusion very clearly in our practice. So whether or not you attain enlightenment, just sit in Zazen. That's enough. When you try to attain enlightenment, then you have a big burden on your mind. Your mind will not be clear enough to see things as they are. Your mind will not be clear enough. If you truly see things as they are, then you will see things as they should be. On the one hand, we should attain enlightenment, that is how things should be. But on the other hand, as long as we are physical beings, in reality, it is pretty hard to attain enlightenment. That is how things actually are in this moment. So, it's a very, very true teaching, a very, very true practice, where we establish our practice in delusion. As long as we are physical beings, Suzuki Roshi's teaching, we have needs, wants, desires. We have to get on in the world. We have to look after our health and our welfare. We have to deal with other people. We have to live our lives. So carrying around some big perfect ideal of enlightenment or living as a Buddhist will weigh you down and prevent you living your life. It is a guiding star. That is all. It is a compass to bring you in a general direction. Don't carry around the whole topography of your desire for enlightenment on your back. If you start to sit, both sides of your nature will be brought up, and we will see things both as they are and as they should be. So the purpose of Buddha's teaching is to point to life itself, existing beyond consciousness in our pure original mind. All Buddha's practices were built up to protect this true teaching, not to propagate Buddhism in some wonderful mystical way. So when we discuss religion, it should be in the most common and universal way. We should not try to propagate our way by wonderful philosophical thought. In some ways, Buddhism is rather polemical. Because the Buddhist must protect his way from mystic or magical interpretations of religion. But philosophical discussion will not be the best way to understand Buddhism. If you want to be a sincere Buddhist, the best way is to sit. We are very fortunate to have a place to sit. I want you to have a firm, wide, imperturbable conviction in your zazen of just sitting. Just to sit. That is enough. So, now don't misinterpret the teachings by saying, oh, philosophy is bad. Reject philosophy. Ethical practice is bad. Reject ethical practice. Studying sutra is bad. Reject everything except just sitting. Okay, they're not saying reject all these things. Dogen is not teaching it this. Suzuki's not teaching it here. What they are saying is that the core and most important practice is to sit zazen. Philosophy and all these other things may help you in your conventional navigation of life and in inspiring your practice and bringing your practice on. But all these things are extra, and they are totally meaningless without the practice of zazen. So, some very important teachings from Suzuki Roshi today. Establish your practice here in the midst of your life, in the midst of your delusion, and do not carry around some ideal of your practice as a burden. Returning to composure naturally, it's a very natural process, is what he's talking about. So next time we'll move on to Buddha's Enlightenment on page 131 in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I hope you're all well and healthy, and that you're continuing to find your practice as an important part of your life, as a core part of your life. And I wish you a good practice and a very joyful life. See you next time. Thank you.